That's right. Hi, hello. Thank you. As Gordon said, I'm Aasa Timonen. I'm a doctoral researcher at the Tampere University Game Research Lab. I'm also one of the contributing researchers at the Center of Excellence in Game Culture Studies, which is now coming to an end this year. In last October, I had the most distinct pleasure also being the Game Center's first visiting research fellow, and this is the second time I'm talking here at the Burgess Center. And I'm very happy to be back in Manchester. And I said my upcoming dissertation is about transmedia practice in Warhammer, and I'm also interested in competitive play, very specifically competitive analog play, queer gaming, trans gaming cultures, religion in games, and role-playing games. This is me in Finland's biggest Warhammer tournament, where I won the best painted this year. And if you have not seen me talk before, there's like a lot of new people here. There's only a handful of people who have ever seen me talk before, so buckle up, it's Warhammer time. So what is Warhammer? Who here doesn't know what Warhammer is? Cool. Warhammer is a two-player miniature wargaming set in different settings, which are characterized by this sort of breed of maximalism, and they share a lot of themes within that. This talk is mostly concerned with Warhammer 40k, the sci-fi game of grim-dark space warfare, and which is also the flagship product of Games Workshop, and the game with the most robust transmedia operation behind it. And Warhammer 40k is fundamentally a game about fear and gods. The basic setting of Warhammer 40k is concerned with eternal stalemate between different factions, of which perhaps the most important and most protagonistic is the Imperium of Man, which is described as the worst possible regime imaginable, a totalitarian, fascistic, theocratic hellscape ruled by bureaucrats under the mandate of the holy god Emperor of Mankind. The Imperium struggles to maintain their iron grip of the galaxy against a multitude of different foes, of which the most dangerous is the force of chaos, a demon-worshipping cult, like mix of cults really, who seek to destroy this rotten Imperium. And Warhammer 40k owes a lot of its views on religion on its preceding texts. Two of the most influential, it's a very nice way to say stolen, are Frank Herbert's Dune and Michael Moorcock's The Elric Saga. From Dune, we have the God Emperor concept, and also this kind of using religion as a tool in politics and war. And from Elric, we have the dichotomy between order and chaos, and the demonic powers of chaos who manifest to represent this other side of this conflict. There's also this other guy whose work is semi-important in this discussion. We were talking about this already, but I'll get him on later on. So every faction in Warhammer 40k has some sort of relationship towards faith and religion. It might be their full reason to exist, like for the Gene Stealer cults or the Sisters of Battle, or it might be an antagonistic one, like the Tau, who forbid any sort of religion at all and don't live in this secular philosophical existence. By looking at how religion is represented in the factions where this connection is the strongest, I divided the examples into three separate themes that depict the use of faith and religious soft power and strong power as well within each of these factions. First up is propaganda. This picture is actually from Manchester, or at least it was in Northern Border, a wonderful piece of art that depicts a Gene Stealer cult's character Telemorph, whose whole deal is to be this propagandistic hero character for the downtrodden Gene Stealer cults. And faith in 40k is often used as a tool for propaganda. Used to either create negative affects towards the enemy or positive affects towards the hegemonic faith, whoever is deciding where the propaganda comes from. Propaganda can also appear in the form of false messiahs, or as Dune would call them, lisan al-Gaids. As not to do Adeptus Mechanicus, the techno-priests of Mars, they believe in this god called the Omnissiah, and they believe the god Emperor of Mankind is that Omnissiah reborn. He is their Christ and Messiah. However, the lore of the game implies that the idea of the Omnissiah was very carefully cultivated by the Emperor himself, so that when he arrived on Mars, they would greet him as their savior. So, very much of a Dune and Lisan al-Gaib situation. Emperor is not the only one using this tactic, as the Gene Stealer cult is an insurrectionist army of human-alien hybrids who toil in the shadow of the Imperium and under the yoke of the oppression, only to someday to rise up and break the shackles and overthrow the Imperium. Hell yeah, this sounds great, I'm in. Unfortunately, this class warfare is waged under false consciousness, and the cults are actually duped into destabilizing the planets before the high fleets of the planet-devouring tyrannies arrive. So tyrannies create gene-stealer cults and characters like the Kelemorph to create political instability so that when they arrive, everything will be ready. So the gene-stealer fate is literally a fate about Lisan al-Gaibs believing this kind of things that will never happen, the false messiahs. Both propaganda in this sense were based very much on this Weber's idea of charismatic authority, which is evident in both the emperor and their like imperial demagogues, as well as the gene-stealer called patriarchs, who literally hypnotize the people around them. The second one is the hegemony of faith. The imperial man is deeply monotheistic apparatus where no other faiths are permitted, with the exception of the Adeptus Mechanicus stuff, but they're basically still worshipping emperor, so who cares? And the imperial cult exists in every level of society, in every department of the imperial political machine. This hegemonic power of the ecclesiarchy is wielded not only like a sword, but as a subtle tool for political power. Their reckless piety and zealous faith is often rewarded within the bureaucracy, and lack of faith is seen as innately untrustworthy. How this hegemonic faith works can be seen in how imperium treats those who fall outside of the cult, those who lack faith or appropriate piety. The imperial cult employs inquisitors who answer to no one except the god emperor himself, who have the total authority to judge any individual's fate and judge them accordingly. This bears in the more strong power authority as well, because they literally have a license to kill, but it is even the mere presence of an inquisitor is enough to change the nature of religious discourse into a more zealous one. And lastly, we have the divine justification. Any action is justified through its connection to divine religious power. Oppression, ignorance, and anti-intellectualism, xenophobia, and total war policy are all justified because the God Emperor demands it. He started the Great Crusade and the mandate was clear. Stars belong to humanity, and because Emperor decreed it, it shall be so. However, the fun snag in this is that the Great Crusade and Emperor's drive to conquer the galaxy was based on a secular vision for humanity. In the eve of the Great Crusade, Emperor burned down the last church of Terra, literally, in a book called The Last Church, and forbid any sort of religious practice, worshipping or divine believing in supernatural, to the point of saying good luck was like uncouth, like we don't believe in luck, luck's not the real thing. And however, that didn't really work, and the nascent imperial cult was formed out of sight, believing the emperor to be really a god among men. Still, the Horus heresy, the prehistory setting of Warhammer 40k, the secular philosophy was really the foundation of all this imperium, and how that evolves into this theocratic fascism is really interesting. Religion damned our species for 1,000 years, from the lowest superstition to the highest conclaves of spiritual faith. It drove us to madness, to war, to murder. It hung upon us like a disease, like a shackle bell. The greatest thing mankind ever did was to reinvent itself as a sexual culture. This is from the first Horus Heresy book, Horus Rising by Dan Abnett. And this is a very good point to talk a bit about the non-diegetic perspective, about how the religious edifices of Imperium, especially the God Emperor himself, it has been shown visually and how much that has changed. These are the two original images of Emperor on his golden throne as they appear in Rogue Trader. This has been slightly edited later, Tom Blanchfeld reviewed this painting a lot, and the face has become more skull-like than it was originally, but basically the same image. And these both appear in Rogue Trader in 1987. And these are interesting, right? Because this feels much more like propaganda, in-universe propaganda of a glorious figure on a golden throne, and this is perhaps closer to reality, like this shriveled corpse kept alive with constant sacrifice and like medical attention. But interestingly, only this picture has been like reused later on. That picture has literally never been reused in any other book. So there has been some shift there. Similarly, how the depictions of Imperium has changed from the very much political satire, or contemporary political satire of the 1980s has changed to how Imperium is depicted in the 2010s. So, like, it's I was described this as like a right-wing wet dream, which is like I think an accurate description of what it is. We see very like this innate Catholicism influence in Warhammer 40k, which were originally used as this like a sign of decrepit ancientness, is now just like this kind of very heroic imagery used in fact, which leads up to fascism. Imperative man is a fascistic theocratic state, and the one that wields its religious power together with authoritarian military power. how this is applied is very reminiscent of Francoist Spain and the national Catholicism, where the church became part of the political machine under Franco's regime. This sort of generic fascism of the imperium would be a very strong narrative tool for satire to mix these things, because there is not like clear, imperium is not one-on-one with for like Nazi Germany or anything like that, but it draws these fascistic elements to itself and create this kind of generic costume. It's really interesting, but unfortunately Games Workshop is first and foremost a business to be managed, and Warhammer 40k is a product to be sold. So what we are left is a text which mixes fascism and fate in this giant stew, and then sell it as a fun miniature game for kids of all ages. So that's kind of problematic, I think. My final slide, and kind of fun idea to mull about is that is there even gods in Warhammer? I have used the word God certainly many times today, and religious power structures don't really need an adamant proof of any God's existence to be to create power and create influences. But the Emperor was certainly a post-human Superman when he was alive, but right now he's basically just a physical, like a psychic beacon on life support. Gene-stealer occult star gods are just a psychic bucksworm from another galaxy. And even then we are left with the gods of chaos, right? Which I mentioned earlier. Khorne, Nurgle, Tzeentch, and Slaanesh, who are very much like Lovecraftian entities. Malicious entities, alien beings so incomprehensible that the word God is perhaps the only way to really describe them. Despite them not being really gods, they are more like aggregates of human emotions and like manifestations of what humans think. So is there really even gods in there? Whether there are actually gods, whether God Emperor is a god or just a husk kept alive with human sacrifices, Warhammer 40k shows that even in the absence of gods, when rationality holds no answers, in the face of unending horrors, humans are perfectly capable of creating gods themselves.